Thank you very much for being here. I think we cannot say enough about the work that people in the teaching community are doing around the province this time of year. I know this. I have 2 kids in virtual school myself. My wife is presently upstairs teaching virtual kindergarten, which is exactly as insane as it sounds to you. So I have a great deal of appreciation for you folks taking the time to join us for this. My name is Nat Paul. I am the director of what is called educator support for the Ontario Justice Education Network. And again, we're just very happy to have you. It's gratifying. It speaks volumes about your commitment to your students, to the profession. Before we get started, I also want to thank my super groovy colleagues who are here with me. We've got Michelle Thompson and there's Christy Pagnuti. Both of them have worked really hard to bring this together, and in fact, the entire series together. Christy is running things behind the scenes and keeping an eye on chats and asking questions and so forth. So if you do find that you have a question at any point, you can feel free to use the Ask a Question feature. Christy will forward the questions on to me, and don't feel shy about it. I don't mind, stopping. And so if there's something that's urgent come up, please go ahead. I'm happy to do that. So we're going to begin, as we usually do in these things, with an acknowledgement that we are on the traditional territories of many Indigenous communities, and that Indigenous people have an enduring presence everywhere in modern Canada. Some of us, the 3 of us who I've mentioned, are in Toronto. So this is, of course, the traditional territory of First Nations such as the Huron, the Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat nations. This land is covered by Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaties, but we should acknowledge that we are joined by many people around the province, and so we are engaging with many treaties and many legal arrangements. So as we discuss matters of law, we're discussing what are the most sort of fundamental agreements we make with one another that allow us to organize into communities and into cities and nations. So that means that at the same time, we need to have these discussions while being mindful of promises that were broken as legal covenants and agreements that were not honored, and of the devastation that this has caused for other communities and other nations. And so as we talk about law, we're reminded that justice insists upon the need to redress these wrongs and for a relationship to land that is rooted in our relationships to one another and of all the work we do to care for these relations going forward. All right, so I'm going to start sharing my screen with you, and I'm not the most smooth of screen sharers, so I apologize in advance for a little bit of flipping back and forth, but I want to show you what we're talking about today. We are going to be speaking about a website which has been put together by Community Legal Education Ontario, or CLEO for short. So this is the Steps to Justice website, and it is fantastic. It is a legal repository of about 500 of the most common legal questions that are asked. It gives background information on the law about these issues, tells people what their rights are, but also, and I think very importantly, why it's called Steps to Justice is because it concretely lays out the steps that one should follow if one found oneself in the kind of, with the kind of legal matter that we're talking about here. So they've got it organized into a whole bunch of different subtopics. They're adding new topics as we go. So, obviously, cannabis law changed a couple of years ago. So they have a whole thing on cannabis laws, how that works for workplaces, what it means in terms of things like disability claims and all of that kind of stuff. The main topics are these ones that you see right here, which are great. So just as a sort of a show here, let's say you had questions about something to do with the law of work. You could click on employment and work. And gradually, you would come to a landing page that gives you even subtopics within it. So let's say, you were interested in having to do with something about getting hired. So you can click on the getting hired thing, and eventually, there we are. You scroll down and you see a whole bunch of very specific questions. And so these are great. Let's say here's a good one. Can an employer ask me if I have a police record? So if we click on here, eventually, oh, faster this time, super. So it depends on what they're talking about, what kind of information. It gives you a whole bunch of little basic information here. But if you want to go further and you want to know what to do with it, if this is something which has actually happened to you, you can find your way over here and progress through the steps. So this deals with, what to do if an employer asks you, learn about the record checks they can get, what is a vulnerable sector check, learning about your rights, and asking for a record suspension if that's something that applies to you. So that's great. You can see here that this is really, really amazing content. The question for us is, what's the best thing to do with it? So our work has really been about making sure that you folks as teachers are able to work with it, to share it. And this actually really lines up very nicely with some of the goals that we have as an organization and some of what we think your goals are as a teacher as well. So more and more we hear and agree from teachers that you're asking for teaching materials that are like really practical and have real world applications. I think that's fantastic, because what it means is that you actually do care quite a great deal about what happens with your students after they've gone out of your purview and so forth. Now, as it happens, this is exactly what OJEN is trying to do these days as well. So fundamentally, what our organization is doing is to try to demystify some of the complications and complexity around the justice system, and to encourage a view of learning about the law because it's actually an essential life skill. We are all going to engage with the law at some point in our lives, and the better prepared we are, the better the outcomes are. And this is actually something that bears out statistically. Like, you can actually measure the financial difference, and it's pretty staggering between people who are prepared for legal matters or have help and others who don't. Thanks. So we talk about this, and we use the phrase legal capability to talk about the development of this kind of a group of characteristics. It refers to the development of law as a life skill, particularly as people move into young adulthood and independence, which is, where part of where you folks come in. You've got them at this like really magical time when they are really becoming adults, but they're still children, and they need trusted adults who are outside of their immediate family as a way of sort of expanding their sphere of influence and their understanding of the world. Teachers are magnificent for this. So we help each other out. You have the benefit of pedagogical training, of relationships with students. We have materials. You help us execute our mandate, and we help you execute yours. So if we can help you guys meet your curriculum expectations, that's great. It works towards everybody's goals. So that's sort of my pitch to you as I go into talking about this resource. I hope you'll take it up. So of course, initially, we started to develop these resources with the idea that they would be delivered in physical classrooms. But as COVID started to emerge, it became really clear to us that we were going to need a way to deliver them over platforms like this, like Zoom or like a Google Classroom. So the rest of the session that I'll be doing now is a little run through of how we suggest that you might do that. We're going to use our Steps to Justice housing law. So we're going to be engaging with the Residential Tenancies Act and the rules about renting and leasing and what your rights are and what your responsibilities are as a landlord, as a tenant, and so forth. So I'm going to switch back here. 1 second. I get my PowerPoint again. All right, so. Sorry. All right. So here it is. This is what the resources look like. We have 10 or 11 of these ready to go that you'll download. This is Steps to Justice Housing Law. All of them follow the exact same format, and it's very simple, and there's reasons for that. So the first thing that we do is we provide a hook. It's a very simple hook. It's just true and false questions. After we've got interest, we show the website. We demonstrate how to use it by giving a relatively simple scenario that they have to find answers to, but rather than have them doing that independently, you demonstrate as the classroom leader, or you work together in a large group so that they see you working through the website. You'll show them all of the different ways there are to search, and you'll sort of really scaffold them through the first time. After they've done that, we then have, depending on the unit, 4 or 5 other questions, which are really great for working in groups. So you can split your kids into groups. You can use something like a breakout room feature, or if that's unwieldy, or if their tech doesn't allow it, you can simply group them however you ordinarily would. Like, it's very easy to just say anybody who's got a last name between, you know, A and G, you get scenario 1, you get scenario 2, so forth. And I'll show you later that we have means for you to distribute those questions beforehand so they have them in hand. The true or false polling. So here's one of them. You know, this is what it looks like when we give the presentation live. As a landlord, I can increase the rent whenever I want. That's my property. Is that true or false? So that's false. You can only increase the rent once a year. But if you do it through Zoom, you can use the polling feature, and you can set these up in advance. So this is what the same thing looks like. And you can have people obviously just click on what they believe. It gives you sort of a real-time statistic, and then you can use that as a jumping off point to talk about their answers. When you finish with the true and false questions, it's going to be clear that you've moved into an area, in this case, having to do with housing and the law around housing. So you might try and get kids to think about what else they think might come under this. One of the things that I found successful has been to, you know, like if they're really kind of reluctant to participate and stuff, a question that I often ask is, you know, how many of you are looking forward to moving out of your parents' house? And then all of a sudden you see sort of like the backs get a little straighter, and then, oh yeah, I kind of would like to move out of my parents' house. Okay, so what kind of issues do you think you might encounter? Well, what is covered in housing law? So for sure, things like discrimination, moving out, renting, whose responsibility repairs are, all of those kinds of things, tenant applications, even the process. You know, there's a few years ago, we moved to a standardized rental agreement in Ontario. So knowing what the standardized rental agreement looks like so that you know you're not being, you know, sold a bill of goods if you're renting for the first time kind of thing. A lot of these also engage with human rights laws. So for people who have some familiarity with human rights, you know that they are a set of personal characteristics on whose basis you are not allowed to discriminate against people. And it's in these sort of 5 social areas, which are housing, contracts, employment, union representation or collective organizations, and then receiving services. So in those areas, you cannot discriminate against people on the basis of things like age, sex, gender. So this actually is super relevant when you're renting an apartment, because there are a lot of landlords who would like to, for example, not rent to somebody who they think is a single mother who might not be able to manage the rent. Can't do that. So you get them talking about these kinds of issues. And then we show them that there's a website, and the website has all kinds of great information for how to find answers to real questions that you might have about housing. And so we're going to introduce the format by giving them a demonstration scenario. So I'm going to read this. So I'm going to take water. So let's say, here's the scenario. My landlord is very rude to me and the other students who live in the apartment building he owns. He routinely yells us at over the phone and sends us emails threatening to raise the rent or have us kicked out if we don't clean the place. He's especially mean to younger students. Last week, he came into our unit without warning and screamed at my roommate for leaving her laundry lying around. She broke down crying. You know, this is too much. So we probably give students a minute here to do what we call issue spotting. Like, do they see anything which seems wrong about this? And then we can have a conversation about where the things they might think are wrong also interact with the law. So we move closer to that sort of what's wrong with this versus what's illegal. You can talk these things out. We're moving closer to the law in this case. And then we have specific questions that we're going to use to explore this issue. So this is the other, we provide these, of course, in every instance. So this is the format of it. We have this question. So here we have some follow-up questions. So what are some examples of harassment? What should this person do when they talk to the landlord about this problem? Why should the person talk to their neighbors? Which government agency, and so forth. So these are the questions that we're going to try and answer. So to do that, I'm going to switch back out. So I'm going to just go back to the basics here. All right, and while I'm here, I'm going to quickly show you something else. Not that. No. Yes, yeah, okay. So this is one of the things that you're going to be downloading when you actually do this. So this is the demonstration guide that comes with this, and I raised this because I want to show you that when we do this demonstration question, there's a teacher version of it. And in the teacher version, it tells you where to start on each of the different questions that are asked, and also where to find the information. So if we just quickly scroll down, each package contains a teacher version and a student version. So what you give to the students, there we go. You see, same question, but it doesn't have the little cues on the edge there. So we go back to the questions, and just for argument's sake, I'll keep this one up on display so we can still see it. Oopsie. All right. So we see, all right, we're going to start at the steps to justice topic, laws that protect tenants, with the question, my landlord is harassing me. What can I do? So here's steps to justice. We go and we will find the housing section. So here's housing law. Much faster this time. So under the heading laws that protect tenants, here we find it. And eventually, whoopsie, there we go. And here it is, my landlord is harassing me, what do we do? So when we click on this, this is what we refer to as the actual landing page. So for each question, this is the page that you're going to land on. You can see sort of, I'll just flip back over here. The question is, what are some examples of harassment? We say that we find this on the landing page. So you will see on the landing page, here are some examples of things that could be harassment. So this is very simple. This is the kind of information that we're asking your students to find. Each of these has 5 or 6 questions, sub-questions within it. So what you're going to do is you're going to work your way through all of these questions. And while you do that, you can show that there's a few different things. So you can search, you can search just with a topic search here. So, if you wanted to look for harassment, there's probably a few different places in which that comes in. Sure. It's also helpful to spell it right when you do it. So you can search that way. You can just go by topics as I have, but I should also point out here that there's a live chat function. So if you can see this, there actually are staff at Community Legal Education Ontario who might not respond live, but they're fielding questions every day. And they are committed to getting back to you with your questions very soon, I think within 24 hours. While I'm talking about these folks, I want to point out as well that everything that's on Steps to Justice is reviewed by a staff of lawyers. So they're constantly updating it. Nothing is on here without being current and accurate. So as soon as something is legally not accurate anymore, it comes down, it gets worked on, and it gets put back up when the accuracy is there. So at this point, you've now worked through the demonstration question, and this is the point at which you would send your kids off into groups in one way or another. You can find your way to do this. We have a bunch of other questions. I'm not going to actually go too far into the questions, but I'm going to show you some of what kinds of things you might be working with. So here's the next scenario. It has to do with a student who's renting a room off campus, made payments, but has been late and is running low on cash. The landlord is threatening to evict. What are the options and how will this affect me? So again, it tells you, you know this so that you can go and help the students, but so it tells you, you start on the topic paying rent, what can happen if I'm behind, and you can find your way, you can direct the students to these pages. It directs you to cool forms like the notice to end tenancy. One of the really cool things that you can do with the Steps to Justice is in a lot of cases, where it says, you know, you need to use this form, it actually links to the actual form you want to use. So you don't have to go dig it up and find it. And that's a great way to actually get kids to practice doing something really practical. You can have them, you know, make up a scenario and fill out, a notice to end tenancy. Some kids, you know, probably have experience with this kind of stuff. So it's always a caution for us to not be too flippant about, you know, things that might be part of people's real lives. Like, you don't, you know, make a whole big thing about, your parents have lost their jobs and now you're getting evicted. Like, that's pretty harsh. So try not to be too funny, but this is the kind of stuff we're dealing with. So we show them the questions and we break them off into small groups. To do that, we give them probably 10 or 15 minutes. Again, the student versions, you know, have no answers and so forth. So I am going to stop sharing just for a minute. And here we are, we're back to me. After they've had sort of 10 or 15 minutes to do this, we're going to get the group back together and we're going to spend some time just sort of taking it up and talking to them. So we want to figure out what they've learned. We want to be able to assess whether or not they've got a good handle on the resource. And then once we've done that, we can talk about, interesting things they've discovered or, new bits of information, what have you, questions or complications. At this point, once they've done this, so theoretically, they've had a chance to practice using the website. And at that point, you have the option of introducing a far more complex question if you'd like to. So I will grab that question for you really quickly. All right, so here you can see, so we call this the large group practice question. It's always the last scenario. And this is one that involves a whole bunch of stuff. So it involves renting for a long time and having roommates. It involves being in an accident and finding oneself with a disability that impedes access to the space. It involves whose responsibility it is to modify or to accommodate the person. So this is a human rights issue because you have you have a human right to access your living space. And a whole bunch of stuff here about what should happen next and what sorts of things you need to think about in this. And rather than walk you through all of the different elements of this, what happens here is these are going to draw from all of the different areas that your students have just practiced. So theoretically, they all should have a little bit of these pieces, but you should also be fairly familiar with how to flip around and click around. You can leave this as something to work with. It's great as homework if you want to. But what we do definitely have is so that you have something to work with at this point in the more complicated question. Each of these more complex questions comes with a sort of about a page of discussion points for you, the teacher. So it tells you where to start to look. It tells you what sorts of things to think about. It tells you where to follow to find things like links for disability and what constitutes a disability, and all of those kinds of things. So we're hoping that this gives you a fair bit in the way of information and a fair bit in the way of stuff to help you. I'm going to quickly, so that's it. There's 10 of these things that are ready to go. I'm going to quickly show you a little bit about where you might want to, where you're going to find this stuff on OJEN's website. So if you find yourself on the OJEN website here, there's a couple of different options. You can always go down and find, are you a teacher? There's a very good looking stock photo of a teacher. So if we click on him, you can find classroom resources. You can find stuff like booking a speaker and so forth. I actually, right now, the easiest way is to just go from the OJEN, from the homepage. We've got a banner that's rolling, and you can find the one, where'd you go? See all of these exciting things. So resources for remote teaching and learning are divided between OJEN's own resources and some really cool stuff that we found from other folks, which are great. One of the things in there that's super is a worldwide list of how the courts around the world are dealing with COVID. It's amazing. It's so neat. But so we find ourselves in the OJEN teaching resources. So here you can see all of the different workshop topics we have: immigration, employment, criminal law, family law, housing, human rights, debt. So this is really with your, receiving services, health and disability, and abuse and finally violence. And right here, this is the housing law online workshop. So when you click this, I'm going to open it up into a tab. Okay. Here you have 3 different parts. The guide, which is this thing here that I was showing you. So all of the steps, the moves that you go through. You have the online presentation. So this is effectively the PowerPoint. It is basically this thing that I was showing you earlier. It's just mine is modified so that I have cues for little things that I want to say to you guys as teachers, but it's the same thing. And then here, I'll just open this up really quickly. These are the worksheets. So here it is exactly the same questions, except that they're just, parsed out into one file so that you don't have to give the students the whole file or worry about how to chop a PDF up. You can just do this. Some people are also using these and just entering them in like Google Docs so that students can actually fill it out live in there, which is really great. And then I want to find this other super cool thing I told you about Michelle. One of the things that Michelle did is she put together a really great video guide for how to work through this when we were talking about doing it in person, but it's amazing. And Michelle's voice is much better than mine. And I strongly recommend you to have a look at it because it's got all of the sort of tips and tricks around the content and stuff that we haven't gotten to. That's pretty much it. I'm going to take some questions in a second. This here. All right, there we go. So I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about is like, so why do you do this? Why do we think it's good? So we talked a bit about the law and everyday life thing, and that's still the biggest reason. But there's a couple of other things too. One of them is we understand that students' lives don't end at the classroom, and working and talking with law teachers, but also all kinds of teachers who talk to us about their relationship with students, we know that students who trust you are coming to you with personal matters, and that you as law teachers, you seem like experts to them, but you're not, or many of you aren't. I'm not, so I'm in the same boat as you. And it's difficult, it's daunting. So what you have here, first and foremost, is a legally accurate, up-to-date, absolutely reliable, will always be reliable source of legal information. So that if a kid comes to you, you can say, I don't know, but here's this other thing that you can look at. So why is that good? Well, that's good because it's something that they will have with them their entire lives. And when we talk about legal capability and the transition from young people, young personhood to adulthood, that's there. That's never going to go away. It's also good for teachers and adults and lots of other people who don't know too much about the law until we find ourselves smack dab in the middle of it. We try not to draw this sort of distinction between us as knowing so much stuff about the law and students as being as relatively naive about it, because the fact is not that it's just sort of endemic to the field. People don't really know that much about it until they have to, and then you go, oh my God, there's so much to know. So to be forewarned is to be forewarned. To be forewarned is to be forearmed. To have forearms. I don't know, something. So this is good. We hope that you'll use it. We hope that you will share it with colleagues. The other thing is the format is simple for a reason, and that is because we want you to be able to start your own investigations. So there's never going to be a chance that we've covered every possible thing. So if you have a kid or you have an issue of your own, or you think of something that you see in the news and you want to know about it, you can start a question and use the exact same format. You can have a big question, find 4 or 5 different little questions, and that way you can shape this. So you always have the option of manipulating this, this resource, or using this resource as a model that you can manipulate to meet the needs of yourself, your students, what's going on in the world. So there it is. I think we have a little bit of time for questions. Oh, and I've got a great tip from Michelle. So she's right. Steps to Justice also has a section on education law. So more stuff is going to be coming up over the next couple of months. This is going to be helpful for you, for colleagues. It's super. So this is one of the ones we're really excited about. This definitely will become a new full module. So we'll have that ready. I should also just quickly, point out that one of the things that they've done is because of COVID, they've got a subtopic on how COVID impacts every single one of the topics that they've gone through. So it's COVID and employment, COVID and housing, COVID and family law, all of these. And there are a myriad of different things that are, that are interesting. You could very well give an assignment where you ask kids to find out what's happening. You assign this one family law, you assign that one consumer law, you assign this one whatever. Just a quick little run through. So I think that's probably it for my talkie. I have a minute to deal with questions.
Sure, there's a couple questions that have come in here, Nat. One of the questions is, can we arrange for a lawyer or paralegal to come to our virtual classrooms with these workshops?
That's a great question. I really appreciate that. So that's super. Not only do you have the option, we really, really recommend that you do, because, I am about, in this presentation, I'm about 2 minutes away from coming into an area of law that I know nothing about and I'm completely unprepared for. If we're not lawyers, and even lawyers, who aren't specializing in the topic that you're dealing with, it's not, automatic for a lot of people. So rather than have you, give the wrong information or be stumped, we're very happy to provide you with a lawyer to speak to your students. Now, people will know that we've done this physically for many, many years. That option is now there to have somebody come in by Zoom or by Google Classroom. It's the same process. So you can find, actually, if you recall, that teacher, that good-looking teacher with his arms, sleeves rolled up, smiling at the students, find that guy again. There's a click right within that, or a link right within that to get yourself a speaker. It's a great idea. So all of those little questions where you're like, I think maybe, but I don't really know. That's there always.
And kind of a follow-up, it says, can someone from OJEN come and run the workshop in the class?
For the most part, no, and certainly, well, nobody's going to any classrooms right now. But even at the best of times, there are times when we do that. It's mostly to pilot something and to try it out. So some of us were lucky enough to try this out in a few different classrooms. And the feedback from kids was great, because we went from much more complicated questions to much more easy to handle, questions. We're thinking that this is going to be something that you can use in like a civics class. So in a civics class, you're talking about quite different students, in October of grade 10 than you are in June of grade 12. So we need it to be a little bit simple. Actually, on that, I'll say as well that one of the things, so Clio, because they engage with the public and public legal information all the time, everything they write is at an accessible reading level. This is pitched at about grade 8. So everything in here is grade 8, grade 9 reading level. We won't come in for the most part, but we can definitely help you find somebody who can. And we do PD all the time. So if you're in a board where you'd like to have more on this, we're doing PD by Zoom all this year. You can find me, you can find OJEN, let us know. We're very happy to come in and help.
Thanks, Nat. And the question here that's coming through, can I modify the slides if we want to make my own questions or scenarios for my class? So the slides that OJEN already has available.
So this is a bit of a tricky one. You can't, so we publish everything in PDF precisely because we hope that it will become slightly more difficult to modify. Once you modify something that is our intellectual property, it's no longer our intellectual property, and we can't sort of stand behind the copyright and the information which is in it. So the simple answer for this is you can use whatever questions you want. You can use the format, as I said, as you want, but I would not suggest modifying the slides. Everything that we've done has been legally approved, legally vetted. So I think there's nothing stopping you from making your own slides and from using ours as a template, but that's actually why we don't provide it as a PowerPoint. It's not for you. We're not concerned about you, the teachers, but if somebody got a hold of a modifiable PowerPoint that had our logo on it, we could get in trouble.
Thanks. And there's just a couple more questions that have come here. is there a minimum number of students that you need to run this workshop or can I assign this for students to work on their own independently?
I absolutely think, if you want to do it the way I've done it, you need 10 students. So you can break them into, 5 groups of 2 or something like that. But there's really nothing that's requiring you to do that. And I know that the way classes are broken up right now is really strange. There are some very small classes and some very big classes, and some classes that end at weird times, and sometimes that you need to assign asynchronous learning and stuff like that. So I would, this is very easy to do. This is very easy to give to students and say, here are some questions, take this home, work on it, here, work with a buddy if you want to, but there's no limit. You can do this with 1 student. I could easily sit and tutor somebody with this, no problem.
Great. And Nat, I have a question more generally about OJEN webinars. Participants asking, is there one place where I can find a list of available webinars like this one?
That is probably a question, Christy, you can answer.
I can take that. Yeah. So yes, we'll be posting them as they become available. So we're currently working on planning a number of webinars throughout the school year. And as they become available, we'll post them on the website so you can come back and look often. But the way that we do get the information out mostly is through the teachers' news flashes. So if you're signed up online, if you are receiving our news flashes, that's probably the most up-to-date place because we are constantly getting more webinars planned and we're constantly adding to that. But you can either check on our website to find the information or stay tuned on our news flashes and we'll keep you posted.
Yeah, and if you want to get signed up for news flashes, all you have to do is go to the OJEN website. In about 2 seconds, a little pop-up will come and it'll ask you if you'd like to sign up for communications from OJEN. This will pop up for you for the rest of your life. I don't know why it keeps popping up for me, but it pops up every time I come on the website. You can't miss it. I guess another option is to follow us on Twitter because we sometimes, we put out information about things on Twitter. So I know we have a number of really interesting ones coming up. Michelle is doing one on how legal aid works. Then coming up, we have some neat stuff on a quite interesting case that happened actually just about a year ago. A young man attacked two women in a massage parlor, so sex workers in a massage parlor. He killed one of them and wounded the other. And through the course of investigation, it became clear that this individual was linked to the incel movement, so the involuntary celibates. And with further investigation, the Crown decided to charge him with the additional offense of terrorism-related murder and terrorism-related attempted murder. So we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the intricacies of that. We have things coming up on Indigenous land claims and a whole bunch of other stuff. So do stay tuned.
I just wanted to hop in here and say, actually, if you visit our YouTube channel, also absolutely everything that gets video recorded that we do, which is most of these things, ends up there. And sometimes it'll get there a little bit earlier than it gets onto exactly the right place in our website. So with a lot of our resources, with any of that stuff, with any of our sessions that came out of the Summer Law Institute, our sort of big annual flagship PD event, we did all of that online this year. And so all of that content is viewable and searchable. It's just, I'll drop a link to our YouTube in the chat, but if you just go to YouTube and search OJEN ROEJ, which is French OJEN, ROEG,
Réseau Éducation Juridique.
I am monolingual. It's embarrassing. All of that stuff is there, and it's really easy to find on demand.
I appreciate that. That's great. See, I told you. This is why they don't let me do things by myself. So I think if we don't have anything else, I think that's it. I just, again, thank you, all of you, for joining us. Tell your friends, tell a whole bunch. And with that, I'll sign off. Thanks to Christy and Michelle. And we'll see you the next time. Take it easy.